Hi everyone, it's Justin here, Voices for Voices. Thank you so much for joining us again on this episode of the Voices for Voices TV show and podcast. We're well over 360 plus episodes. Thank you for watching and listening. We are nearing 100 countries. I've been saying we've been nearing 90 countries for probably the last month or so, and we just added Morocco and Mozambique just in the last week that are watching and listening. And welcome again, wherever you're at here in the United States, across the world. We do tackle and talk about tough topics, tough human topics. We're talking about humanity in areas that may be uncomfortable, which we understand. So if you have children near you, maybe yeah, if you're able to have them maybe move to a different room, or hopefully maybe you have a set of AirPods or headphones you can put in, or if you're watching the same thing, because we are talking about difficult topics, and we wanna welcome everybody who has been with us from episode one, or if this is your first episode. What we have been sharing up until now, and including now, and will be for at least a few more episodes after this one, is there was a case, or is a case down in Letcher County in Kentucky, where a Sheriff Mickey Steins, uh, came into Judge Mullen's chambers and discharged his firearm, uh, murdering him in cold blood. And what we're finding out is a lot, regardless of whose side anybody's on. We're just looking to share the voices of individuals that either are personally involved or know of the conduct that had been happening, from which our guest mentioned off camera right before we started, from that mom approach, where she was seeing things and hearing things. And so that's how we have come into contact with Brandy Taylor. Brandy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Uh, Maybe we can just start, I guess, from the beginning, when you started noticing things, hearing things, and then we can kind of work up to kind of present day, if that works for you.
Okay, all right. There was always rumors around town, or in our little county of, things that went on at the courthouse and, things that wasn't legit, but I wasn't involved in the legal system, hadn't really been around it much. So, it's kind of one of them things you hear, but you just don't know a whole lot about it. And in 2006, I started going through a really rough divorce. Had, a lot of things happen in our family life. And my son started getting in a little bit of trouble. He was a, straight A student, band geek, just a good all around kid. He got caught smoking marijuana. And so he got kind of, we was put in a situation they entered him into. At that time, they had a juvenile drug court program. Um, at that time, Kevin, I think, was the Commonwealth attorney. So he was an attorney, and then Mickey was the bailiff for the court for Judge Jim Woods.
Okay.
Um, so my son, that day when, they wanted to enroll him and everything, I started looking through the rules and stuff, and it was taking a lot of his rights away, and he was just 14 at the time. And as a parent, I kind of was questioning things, like this is a little serious for, marijuana. But I was told that if I didn't sign the paperwork, that they would get me for parental neglect and would take my other two kids. So it was like, give us this one, or we're going to take all your kids. And so that's when our descent kind of started into the court system. From 14 to 17, he was passed around from rehab to rehab. They he was never home. He missed birthdays, holidays. They had to when he was 15. Um, Kind of an example of why I was concerned. When he was 15, they contacted me and wanted to um, place him. He had got a sanction and was in a detention center, Breathitt County Detention Center, where they, would send the juveniles. And they contacted me to let me know they were going to let him take his GED at 15. And, I was begging them. I said, right now with his father not in the picture, this is the only control I have over him is school, getting him going, and doing stuff. And they made it plain that I didn't. He belonged to the state, is the way I was told. So, they let, which I thought was just ridiculous, a 15-year-old take a GED, because I think they were getting a lot of problems with um, truancy, because a lot of these kids that was enrolled in this drug court program, they were missing a lot of school because of all these sanctions, and it was kind of a program that they just they couldn't win. There was no way, you know, um, they couldn't step up. They stayed in that bottom level, and they had drug testing, counseling, court. Every week. It was every day of the week they had something that they had to participate in. And if they missed it or was late or failed a drug test or anything, then here come the sanctions. Um, but we noticed that a lot of the rehab programs was, I mean, crazy. He went to one in Beattyville when he was 16, about 16. And they loaded them all up and took them all to a dentist and was going to have all their wisdom teeth took out.
Okay.
So I complained and I was like, if he needs that done, then he's going to go to our family dentist.
Right.
I'll take him, and and there was just a lot of little things here and there. So when he was 17 and a half, he was just tired of it at this point, and he was in front of the judge, and he asked him, he said, what can I do to just be done, you know? And they told him he could have served 45 days. So, 2.5 years later, he could have served 45 days in the detention center, and that would have been it, instead of having his whole teenage years, wiped away. But the group of kids that went through this program with him, they were kind of the first batch of kids that went through. And I had noticed all the kids had patterns, like all of the families were going through traumatic things. They were going through things that were, which, does cause problems with teenagers, but they took these vulnerable group of kids, placed them all together, and then, ran them through these programs for profit, to try to, they were making money off of it, you know. And, a lot of the families, we didn't have money. We couldn't afford a lot of the things. And if my parents hadn't have helped, I don't know what I would have done, because, you would have to travel twice a week to go see them wherever they had them in the state, and things like that. So when he finally stepped out, we thought he was free and clear of everything and was going to get started. And he had been home, I think, 2 weeks. And he went to a friend's birthday party and ended up, Jim Stevens had he's a cop in Jenkins that I think a lot of people in the counties had a lot of problems with. He had came through and took my son to jail that night. So
Well,
um, and I will say this, Mike Watts, he's a great guy. He's a really good guy. He come in that night, helped me with the situation because my son wasn't even old enough to even be in jail. So,
yeah,
he come and helped me that night get everything straightened out. But, that was our start into the adult program. So from 14 to the age of 30, my son spent either detention centers, rehabs, jail, adult rehab. So, and a lot of his friends that were in the program with him from the beginning were also being done. People, like Ty, Lexi Bentley, a lot of people now that are victims, in some very horrible ways. Um, but they kind of put these kids. I feel like they were handpicked.
yeah,
It is my belief is that they were almost handpicked, and they knew these were kids that they could. A lot of the kids didn't have parents that really cared, or gave much of a fuss back or anything. And I think they totally took advantage of these children and our families and, the whole situation with it. And so, now you see at them as adults, when they started growing up and getting older, like I said, they found ways to put them into the adult system, adult drug court, and then the rehabs and ARC and things like that came into play. But um, the the kids would always come to me. I always wanted to be kind of like a safe place for them. Um, so that's kind of how I ended up being kind of like a witness for everybody. They would show up at the house. They knew they could come get something to eat, wash their clothes, get a good night's sleep, um, a ride to court, a ride to here, a ride to there. I done everything I could to try to help them as much as I could because they were in a system that there was just no way out. A lot of the females, suffered the sexual abuse from people at the courthouse. You know, Males did too. It wasn't just the females. A lot of them was treated horribly at the jail. I mean, just inhumane conditions all the way around. Um, we would complain and try to get stuff done, and it was just you would hit a roadblock everywhere you turned. And the girls it broke my heart for them because a lot of them at this time they were young, they were mothers, some of them mothers, they were still teens. And I was a teenage mother, but I had help, I had family, I had and a lot of these they were they would get CPS involved. You
mm,
know they were taking their kids, they were it was just a never ending cycle to keep them somehow tied to that courthouse, whether, it was drug charges, traffic charges, like I said, with their kids, the situation with Ty is crazy. I mean, her life was, and there's not words for it, the things that she had to go through, losing her kids. And she always done what they asked her to do. with the programs and things, but we found out it was never good enough. It was never enough to get them out of there, um, and everything. And they had so much potential. These are kids that wasn't, um, problem, yeah,
Mhm.
they had, like I said, my son, it was marijuana, but, these were intelligent kids. They, were smart, resourceful. Um, and the county started degrading their names and lowering their value as teenagers. So as a young adults, they couldn't get jobs. They couldn't, they were pretty much isolated and become their own little network, their own little community, subculture, I guess you could say, amongst themselves. That they all kind of supported each other, took care of each other, and me and other people in the community would try to help as much as we could, to try to make things a little easier, or try to help them as much as we could, because the injustice that they were going through was just insane, things that they were having to deal with.
Yeah, and it seems like, yeah, there's like no check and balances, nobody really to come in and audit what's happening, these atrocious, horrible conditions, these sentences, like you said,
Yeah.
just round up everybody and we're gonna go get your wisdom teeth taken out. I mean, these are just incredible to hear that's happening, in the United States of America. Obviously, we know things are quite divisive and have been, and I guess will continue to be. But it's one of those things that's like I can't believe that they would do something like that and somebody wouldn't come in and at least start asking some questions. It's been like way too overdue for that. And bless your parents, your family, yourself for what you did and what you are doing and helping others like that. That is just godly work to, like you said, you're like come over, what, well, wash your clothes, well, get you a warm meal and things that we take advantage of. And and here you are, you're doing it for people you don't even know them really. You know a little bit about them, but you're like, hey, come under my wing for as much as I can help you to do. So uh that's just
They became
incredible.
they became like my kids.
Yeah.
They just kind of incorporated into our family, and still to this day, if one of them called, I'd be like, okay, let me see what I can figure out, to try to help. And it was a safe little community outside of our community. It was,
Yeah.
they all bonded. Me and Ty was talking one night about how, if they all fit together. If one child had a weakness in this area, then another one would, pick up that. You know, you had some that could hustle and make sure everything was took care of. And I told Ty, I said, we was poor people, and but we always managed to have food for everybody, and
Mm.
what everybody needed, because we all worked together to try to make this happen. And the potential that was stolen from these kids is heartbreaking. um the things that they could have possibly done if not snagged into that system is just, I think, the hardest part for me. Um, to see now a lot of them still, like, on parole. I mean, for child support, for the rest of their lives, or
Mm.
just, things that, that's like my son. I was talking about, he, rehabs and drug courts and everything. And if you go back and look at his charges, he doesn't have drug charges.
Mm.
It was like his was traffic violations or no insurance, no tags, no, just something that's like a pull him over and then go to jail, and then it was like, well, what can we find, to
Yeah.
charge him with to keep him here? And they done a lot of them that way. And it's still going on. And that's sad. That I feel like the wrongdoings, you know, they were getting their jollies and, having a
Hmm.
good time at the expense of our children and our community, our families, it was nothing. We were threatened with CPS regular. You go along, you shut up, quit making a scene, quit making a fuss about things, and or we'll harass you. We'll give you a little trouble. I've had my two younger children pulled out when they were in grade school, asking them if I allowed them to drink. Just the
Whoa.
most moronic,
Yeah.
things. And the kids would come home and be like, that was so embarrassing, Mom. They took us out of our class and things like that. And I just felt like, they took so much of our lives away. We missed so many things with each other as a family, because I felt like, they had a financial mission that, or, that they had ulterior motives, with what was going on in their minds compared to, what was really going on.
Yeah. How has all this affected you emotionally and like your mental health? It seems like it would take a toll on and then secondly, how are you able to power through that? And like you said, like were you able to help others? Like I know some people would just get caught up in e- e- every little event, and we all do.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering like how all that affected your mental health, and then how you powered through it to kind of inspire others that may be in a similar situation or know somebody, and maybe some I don't not you have to have like tips and tricks, but how did you get to the point where you're like, you know what? I'm going to be able to do what I can, and as one person, as a family, uh, could you share maybe just a little bit of that side of?
Well, I mean, it was a struggle. I know like I said, we had our own little community and they all pulled together and we all kind of took care of each other. And, there were moments I would think, and my son would come to me and he'd say, Mom, you're making it worse on me. You're making it
Mm,
harder on me. And, it was, I think our little town, there were so many secrets. There were so many things that we were told not to speak of, not to talk about, not, and if you did speak up, you were degraded, you know, like you were ignorant. You don't know this, you don't know that. And I had the fortunate I got to go to college. I got out and went to college and I didn't get to finish my degree, but I do have enough education to know they were violating their rights left and right.
mm,
They were causing a lot of issues, but they would make you second guess yourself. Like or they would put the threat in with your children, and it would be like, "Mom, stop," And so after my children became adults, and it was still continuing. So, I finally just said, the best thing I can do is to maybe stay quiet and be an advocate and stay home and help them. That was, I guess, I felt like that was my only outlet that
mm,
I could do at that time. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't. anybody that could provide any kind of assistance that way. But like I said, I could put you know, a night or two, roof over their head, food, clothes, whatever they needed. They would come to the house and work it out. The girls sometime they would come in and you would see them swapping clothes, and
Mm.
it was like everybody just come together as a community and took care of each other. And I think that's where I think my what
Mhm.
I do come in, because nobody was hearing my voice. Nobody was listening to what I had to say or what I thought they was doing to the kids. And so that was my outlet, was to make sure they were at least safe, or they were took care of, or and the harassment, it was worth it. It was worth it just to make sure those kids, it broke my heart because they never got to be kids. They never got to have those normal teenage years of proms and dating and just a normal teenage life. They never got to have that. So it's really something that, I kind of grieved for my child, but then as
Mhm.
soon as I started meeting these other kids and hearing their stories and what was going on with them, it's heartbreaking, the things that was taken from them, I feel like.
And I can assure you that your voice is going to be heard and seen by so many people on our show and beyond, and shared. And I'm so glad to have you with us for the short time that we do, to learn about you, the awful things that you witnessed and is still to this day, as that mother figure that you're finding, even with all the negatives, you're still finding your voice, and that is by, helping in whatever way you can, whether that's a roof over their head, whether that's a meal or two. And I think that's so admirable, and it's so inspiring to me, because so often uh, I take for granted things, and I think a lot of us do. Just a roof over the head or a meal, and without having to go through what these kids, where their innocence was literally just taken
Rip.
away from them, and they
Yeah.
weren't able to experience what children should have, and growing up. And kids are going to be kids.
Right.
They're going
Right.
to do things that are right and wrong. But when you
They
mention,
criminalized them, though. That
yeah,
was the part. They just criminalized them from the teenage years. So
from day one, yeah.
from day one. So, when they did get old enough to start getting jobs and getting out in the community, by that time their names were destroyed.
Mm,
Nobody would hire them, or, so they couldn't get jobs. They couldn't get on their feet. They couldn't, and so it just, kind of slid right back into, the problems that was going on with drugs and everything else. So, it was like a never ending cycle that you just they couldn't break. I don't even think, like, a lot of the girls even knew that they were being so abused, because they would, come to the house and, say things like, if you ever get in trouble, you know, I, I got a friend, at the courthouse that,
mm,
can do, they'll help you out. And, but once they start telling you, how that friend come about, and, you start breaking down and telling them, no, that's wrong.
yeah, that's right.
They shouldn't be doing that to you all. And,
Mm.
so, yeah, like I said, it's just a lot of stolen potential, a lot of lives that were just never given that opportunity to shine, you know.
Yeah, I think it's again, I think it's incredible that uh you're speaking out and sharing, because it's such an important time that uh it we're finding as an organization, and these topics such as what we're speaking about, there's people that are gonna support the topics, and there's gonna be people that are not. And I would rather be on the side of being able to look myself in the mirror and say, okay, as not as phony, but as cliche as that sounds, of being able to look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what, there's going to be people, no matter, celebrities, even those popular, or how much money people have, there's still people that aren't going to like that. So I can't expect that everybody's going to like what we're doing. But the fact that these children had from day one, I mean, we talked to Taya, and she said, from age 16, um, on, basically, that she went in for one thing and came out having had to do something, completely, not to say unlawful, like you mentioned, where uh girls would say, oh well, I know somebody, and then they share, like, oh well, here's what you do. Then you're hearing it and seeing, like, wait a minute, that's
Right.
that's not right. And uh it sounds
Because
like it.
I didn't have those kind of interactions, I knew Mickey, I knew Kevin, but they both, I never had those kind of problems. But once they started telling me these things, it was like, oh, you know, oh no.
Yeah,
Where do we go? What do we do? Who do we tell? Because it seemed like you would get to where you thought maybe this person might help, and then boom, it's gone. Or you hit a brick wall, and there's just, nowhere to turn. So I think that's why we went kind of internal with everything and said, all right, we got to survive. We got to
yeah,
get through this. And the only way we're going to do it is staying together and working together.
you bet. Well, Brandy, we're getting close to the end of our time together today. I wanted to say thank you so much for speaking up, speaking out. There's going to be a lot of people watching, listening to this episode, as well as the other women that and others that are sharing. We had Ned Pillersdorf, attorney, on a while back, and he was sharing some of the information. But
Yeah.
before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to share how people can. I don't know if there's a way people can learn about what you're doing, or if you can recommend, uh, I don't know, a place to go, somebody to talk to. Obviously, send people our way. We'll
Yeah.
definitely have we definitely have time to have them on our show. We're having Bethany on later
Yeah.
today, and a couple others, and I that's what I said, like, that's what we're here for. We're here to share our voices, and you're sharing not only your voice, but you're sharing the voices. Even though you didn't name names, it doesn't matter. You're sharing the voice of people who had been in different situations, and so those individuals, their voice is being heard through you. Uh, so yeah, I guess any parting thoughts of how people
Just
can learn, and or I don't want to say tips, but uh, whatever, what you got for personal, your brand.
honestly, I think everybody's story is important, no matter how little or how big, and there's safety in numbers. There's safety in coming out and speaking and coming forward. And even if we never see any kind of justice for anything that we went through, if it cleans things up to where my grandchildren and their children don't have to go through the things that we all went through, um that would just be my main thing, I guess. It's just, speak
Mhm.
up. Speak up, and we'll be here to support anybody, and then, support
Mhm.
and help.
Yeah, so thank you for, all you've done and all you continue to do. I know it's not easy to I remember, our first shows, and even now that we get, backlash and negative feedback, and there's going to be people like that. But
Yeah,
again, looking at yourself in the mirror, looking at myself in the mirror, the positiveness, and even if we just reach one person
yeah,
that can learn more about the power they have as an individual, or services, or individuals that can help, or organizations, and feeling like, like I've always wanted to, I don't know, play a musical instrument, or do something, whatever that is to that individual. As much as we're able to just give that inspiration, that's the big thing. And so we hope and we pray that this ends, and you're part of the country, and part of the United States, and all across the world, if this activity is going on, because it's inhumane, and
it's
we
vile. It's vile.
yeah, it's vile. So thank you very much, Brandy, for
You're
joining
welcome.
us. And
Thank
we
you for
want to,
having me.
oh, you're welcome. Absolutely. So when we get ready to drop this, I'll tag you on the on all the links and all that, and feel free, obviously, to share far and wide. And that's what we'll obviously be doing as well, besides putting the shows out on all the audio platforms, and have it on our Rumble channel and our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for being with us, taking time out of your day. You're taking care of your parents. You're doing God's work. So thank you.
I think that's what I was put on this earth for, I think.
I think so. Absolutely. And our viewers, our listeners, thank you for watching and listening. You can find us everywhere on audio, whether it's Apple, or you can go to voicesforvoices.org/podcast. It's free. All these things you can do that are free. You don't have to pay to watch or listen to any of our shows or content. Again, over 360 episodes. I'm sure not only this show with Brandy and Taya, and others that are sharing such powerful information that is really helping us change the world for the better. And if you can give us a thumbs up, you can subscribe, like, follow, share Voices for Voices. We're on all the popular social media platforms. So until next time, we hope that you and we celebrate all the voices that we have, no matter what those are, how small, how big they are. And again, this is Justin with Voices for Voices, and please be a voice for you or somebody in need. We'll see you next time. Thank you so